You're live.
We'll call this meeting to order at 5:31. We'll start out with a land acknowledgement today. We'll move on on our agenda, we'll approve our minutes from our February meeting. We'll take some comments from board members and commission liaisons. We have a training from Acting Lieutenant John Jensen on internal affairs process. We'll take a break, and then we'll do our case review today. We have an allegation of use of force. We have a new entry in the agenda today, a commendation highlight, which I think our auditor Renetsky will be, if that's correct, will be taking. And then we'll also get an auditor report. We'll have some time for public comments if there's anybody in attendance. And then we'll adjourn. All right, since time immemorial, the Kalapuya people have been the indigenous stewards to our region, building dynamic communities, maintaining balance with wildlife, and enacting sustainable land practices. Today, this land acknowledgement is a way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories to honor Native communities by inviting truth and reconciliation. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly removed to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. As we consider the impacts of colonization, we also acknowledge the strength and resiliency of displaced indigenous people. The city of Eugene is built within the traditional homelands known as Kalapuya Ilihi. Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon. They continue to make contributions in our communities here and across the lands. We express our respect for the inherent political sovereignty of all federally recognized tribal nations and indigenous people who live in the state of Oregon and across the nation. All right. Have you all had a chance to look over the minutes from the February meeting, and are there any corrections? Yes, Josh.
Just one quick thing, under other, it said none, and I happen to know there was a reporter here, Haley Kuchansky, which is fine. But I'm just wondering, what's the protocol to listing other? Like, do we list any members of the public who are here, or members of the press, or is it not to be listed? The minor point, but I'm just curious.
No, sure, I will defer that to Lindsay. Do you have knowledge?
Let me ask.
I've been to many public meetings myself, and I don't know what you.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes when there's a presenter or someone else, they'll like note them or name them, but we don't ask people in the audience
don't,
to
okay, that was
identify
kind of-
themselves typically.
Mhm.
People can come and not be identified, so
And if someone comes for public comment,
then they identify themselves.
then would we put them on the minute?
Yeah,
Because that would they'd be part of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Not a big
exactly.
deal. I don't know that we have to amend it then. I'm just.
It's a good question, though. Now I need to know. Inquiring minds.
Well, I think we could make a note to amend the February meeting minutes in our April meeting with additional information.
Yes,
So
that's
can
fine. You
I
can push it.
move to
Move to table to approve the minutes to the April meeting of the CRB.
take a second?
I second.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll table this discussion with new information and we'll approve 2 sets of meeting minutes next month.
Sorry.
No.
Good question.
Okay, comments from board members and commission liaisons. I thank you shout out to Clay for sending in, he's not gonna be able to attend tonight, but he sent in a statement. So I'm gonna start out with his police commission liaison report. And maybe we could do opening comments as a first round during case review tonight. How's that going? Okay. So I'm gonna read from Clay's report. He says, in February, we toured EPD's new wellness center within the police headquarters building and learned about new therapies that are supporting officer mental and physical health. These new policies, spaces, and therapies were introduced to address ongoing mental and physical health concerns associated with the profession of policing. It was particularly heartening to hear the wellness team, which includes officers, staff, and a mental health professional, report that EPD culture is shifting away from hiding mental or physical challenges and instead embracing these resources. Clay, also brought two policy considerations to the attention of the chair of the police commission. These are body worn video, as well as two policies related to property storage while suspects are in custody. Related to body worn video, my understanding is that the police commission may be reviewing the body worn video policies at some point in the near future. I suggested that the Civilian Review Board and the Auditor's Office will have incredibly useful perspective to share since we review so much of the footage. For property storage, this was in response to recent cases that we reviewed in which someone was released from custody to find their vehicle towed and with no access to the funds to retrieve it. I remember that. My hope is that members of the Auditor's Office and or other CRB members will be able to contribute to the policies in question when they arise. I don't believe we have somebody appointed. Okay. And okay, we'll do some opening comments from committee members when we do our case review. At this point in our agenda, I'd like to invite Acting Lieutenant John Jensen to lead a training on internal affairs process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've provided a PowerPoint so that we could guide the conversation a little better. Left to my own devices, we can be talking about anything, so.
Oh, sorry, John, I'm gonna have to take USB back. It doesn't like my
Oh.
shortcut.
So have it.
Totally at risk of stealing it again, sorry.
All right, you have witnesses that I was okay with you.
He's
Stealing
showing me
that.
this, I'm not responsible for forgetting.
So many of you guys know me, I've sat here for a little while, I've been in internal affairs now for about 2.5 years. Really glorified sergeant, but that's kind of where I'm at. Before we start, do you guys have any questions for me right now? You've reviewed a few of my cases. If you guys see anything that you think could be better or changed, let me know. I'm pretty receptive to that.
Do you have any input on purchase? Or by the auditor of the district?
Nope, I am the fact finder, yeah, so. I work with what's provided to me, yeah.
I have to do this in a very particular order. Here we go.
That scares me, so whatever it is you're doing. Thank you for, for being willing.
Here you go.
Okay, so, I'm gonna read some slides to you guys, and it's the information that I can clarify if there's questions, but. So I'm acting Lieutenant, John Jensen, Sergeant Owen Griffith, was here as well. You guys have met him. Aaron Danaher, she usually attends, via Zoom. And then, Sergeant Allison Jordan is part of the, police commission. She works in professional standards policy. And so they're all we all work together. Professional standards. So we report directly to the chief. We share a database with the auditor's office. Track and monitor all police complaints, vehicle pursuits, force response, risk claims, things like that. And we conduct the investigations and risk claim investigations. And then we identify trends, lessons learned. Often we reach out to training and different people if we see something that's particularly eye-opening that maybe we see an uptick of something that we hadn't seen in the past. So, and then what governs us is obviously the code of ethics for law enforcement, our policy, the city's policy as well. And I think you guys have seen a few of those come through, especially when it comes to like workplace harassment kind of cases. And then obviously, most obvious would be state city laws. Our purview is kind of everyone except the chief of police. So anybody that works in and around the police department, to include volunteers, which kind of sounds a little random, but in case something was to come up. Newest is the Eugene Police Sergeants Association. And then we also have AFSCME employees and then exempt employees. So we may be asked to conduct investigations that involve captains and lieutenants and people like that. And then our intake resource or sources are kind of everywhere. So obviously the Office of Police Auditor, they have the portal, emails, social media, people that walk in. If somebody complains about something on scene, we get them that way through a on-scene supervisor. And then obviously if an officer has an issue and they feel like they can trust us, they can come in and tell us and we can just kind of work through it that way. This is just kind of a funny one. This is something that would come through our office. Because I've seen this before.
If I just hit.
I think you just click it, it should. Wrong car. So, you know, I don't know if there's a policy violation there, but if it was a risk claim, we'd probably write a memo consistent with, let's get them 4 new tires and say sorry. Okay, so the different types of investigations, supervisor action is a very common one. That's any inquiry, anything that maybe need a little bit of extra look at. Service complaints and policy complaints, all those would come in through our office. And they're routed to us through the auditor's office, and then we would be able to assign those out. Those are ones that generally aren't going to require additional investigative steps or interviews. Then we get to incident review, and incident review is yet another, like a deeper look into the same thing. And these are ones where it does require a few extra steps. It could lead to potentially allegations, or it could lead to going back to a supervisor action. But that's what an incident review is. An incident review gives us kind of a 30-day window where we can kind of assess what we're looking at to see if there's more there, or if we're okay with just kind of closing it out as a supervisor action. Obviously, allegation misconduct, those are the ones that you guys see most common here. Those are, there's an allegation that an officer made an error. Criminal allegations of misconduct, we generally do not conduct criminal investigations. That's not to say we never do, but generally if it turns into a criminal investigation, we're gonna give that to somebody else. A different agency to kind of assess what is happening. Force investigations, I mean, obviously one of the larger ones is gonna be like a use of force, like a reportable use of force, a shooting, different things like that. Respectful workplace environment. If people don't feel like they're being respected, we conduct those investigations. Those ones we work with the ERC. And then the last is kind of the catch-all for everything else: miscourt, property damage, discharge of firearms, discharge of tasers, and everything else. And then I think this is kind of where the main questions were, which is the phases of internal affairs investigations. So intake classification, multiple intake methods that we discussed. Auditor is going to look at those, and they're going to classify the complaints. And then we notify them of critical incidents. So if there's an officer involved shooting of some kind, we try to quickly let the auditor know. They'll come to the scene and we just kind of hang out with them. The investigation is conducted by an internal affairs sergeant. And then the auditor oversees it. And I mean, you see how they attend the interviews and they make sure that it's that we're hitting what we need to hit to get where we need to go. And then adjudication is the last, or the second to last step. So adjudication is after we compile everything, decisions are made on whether or not this appears to be within policy or other. And then we have a slide about that and kind of anyway, we'll talk about more of that. And then the chief kind of makes the final adjudication decision. And the last one is if it's applicable discipline, and that is through the chain of command, and the chief will determine discipline. So these are just administrative investigations into allegations of misconduct. And again, we do not conduct criminal investigations and often reach out to outside agencies, and that would be through the request of the chief. So the process itself, auditor is the main point of contact. If we receive any kind of information, we put it into a blue team entry, and that is kind of the window the auditor has into the Eugene Police Department. So even internal complaints are reviewed by the auditor, who assesses it and determines what to do with it. So the auditor will classify all complaints, both internal and external, and they route to internal affairs for assignment and processing. Cases are then assigned to either myself or Sergeant Griffith, and we conduct that investigation. What I would say about our investigations is they're fact-based, so we uncover and ask questions to get to the facts of it. And then we don't have any part in the adjudication or discipline. So internal affairs makes the official employee and EPEA initial contact notifications. Basically, we send out an email to let the chain of command know that an allegation has been made. So that person's supervisor, usually the sergeant, is going to tell the individual what the allegation is. And then after we get notification that that's happened, we send an email directly to the individual and then their union representation. From there, we conduct our investigation. Again, auditors can participate in those investigations. And then we create what you guys end up seeing at the end, which is the blue folder. It's routed through the chain of command. So after I complete my portion or Sergeant Griffith, we send it through the chain of command. They have 14 days to review our report and then make a determination on the adjudication. And then the primary supervisor contacts the auditor and they have a conversation beforehand. They don't necessarily have to agree, but they have to talk about it a little bit. Like, these are things that stand out to me. This is kind of what I'm thinking, and they kind of discuss it a little bit. And so here's a flow chart of the complaints. So auditor classifies, gives it to us, we assign it. If it's top one there, if it's an allegation, it's assigned to internal affairs. If it's an incident review, it's also assigned to one of us in internal affairs. If it's a supervisor action, then we're going to give it to the employee supervisor and they can kind of handle that. So they usually will write a memo or they'll notify in blue team the correction they gave or the training that they provided, and then that's codified in there and it stays with that officer or individual. And then above that, if it's an investigation, it goes up through the chain of command to review for adjudication. Any questions on the flow chart?
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe this is better left at the end, and if that's okay too. Could you clarify the relationship between internal affairs and the auditor's office as far as it goes with complaints and discipline for the folks who are not aware of? How the two entities relate to each other?
Actually, there is another flow chart.
Perfect.
That
Great.
addresses it kind of, but knowing that, I can add more information there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Adjudication. So everybody who gets to look at the report can write their own adjudication memo. Okay. So the sergeant and the auditor meet to discuss the case. Sometimes it's in person. Also, lately it's been in person, which is kind of cool. Sometimes it's over the phone and they just can discuss the case. The auditor will write their own recommendation adjudication and they give that directly to the chief of police. The sergeant will write their adjudication recommendation and send it to their lieutenant. Lieutenant reviews it. Depending on their view, they can agree and concur and forward that same memorandum, or they could write their own, whether they agree or disagree. If they disagree, they have to, but if they agree, they still can. That then goes to the captain. From the captain, that goes to the deputy chief, and the deputy chief goes to the chief. So that whole process is 14 days for them. So the expectations are going to act quickly. And you want to know kind of the relationship there? Is it between internal affairs or is it between the sergeants?
I guess it might be helpful to clarify not all complaints come from the auditor's office. Some are internally generated, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
and it's not true or the case that the auditor's office has I guess that would be wanted to clarify for anybody in the community that we don't have like we're not overrepresented in terms of how cases are adjudicated or dictated or disciplined with that regard.
Right. So honestly, oftentimes we all see the same thing. And so we'll kind of discuss those cases. So sometimes the auditor's like, hey, I got a question about this one. And sometimes I'm like, hey, I have a question about this one, right? And so we're able to kind of discuss those a little bit. Those discussions lead to, clarification. Sometimes they lead to, yeah, I think this is unclear. We need to move forward with something, right? And so oftentimes when because we all get to view the same thing, especially I think the easiest one to use as an example would be a use of force, right? Sometimes an officer sees something, maybe they don't articulate in their report, and so there's an unknown, right? And so if we can't figure that out, if the auditor looks at that and they're like, I have a couple questions about that, that's where it goes into where do we classify it? Is it a supervisor action or is it incident review or an allegation? So they'll kind of talk to me and Sergeant Griffith and each other, and they'll say, these are the key questions that I have. If I'm able to kind of explain what that might look like or what happened, if it's not clear, then in our discussion, then they, if it makes sense that, oh, I didn't see that part in the video, that makes sense. It can be a complaint, right? It can be a supervisor action. Or if maybe I'm like, yeah, I don't understand that either, then we change it to an incident review where we can kind of dig a little bit more. We can ask for additional information and start looking into that. And then in the end, it's kind of an open discussion about like, yeah, I see where you're going with this, and maybe an allegation so we can ask those questions would be appropriate. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say the other thing, I think I'm understanding the question. So complaints can come from many places, but they all funnel in to here. So
Yes.
ultimately,
Right.
regardless of where the complaint originates, we're the sort of consolidation point for the complaints to then classify. So we get the internal complaints, or they're entered into a system that we all have access to, which was the blue team system that he's describing.
The window we have.
I have a question, which is, how does it determine which sergeant, which lieutenant, which captain reviews this? Is it based on where the officer involved?
Yes, it's that officer's chain of command.
Gotcha.
And so what's nice is, especially in the middle of the year, officers start to really get to know their sergeants, the lieutenants, the captain over their group, right? And so like a newer officer to a new sergeant, maybe they don't know some things, and as the time progresses, they're like, oh, okay, I can have that conversation with this officer. We can kind of correct it instead of farming out to anybody.
Right.
Yeah. We get to play with a lot of new definitions, and so these are the adjudication definitions. Most of you have seen nearly all of these. Sustained insufficient evidence unfounded within policy. Mediated is one that we don't see very often, and administratively closed. So mediated would be depending on the allegation and maybe some of the elements to this, if both parties can agree to a mediation, it no longer turns into an internal affairs investigation, and they're able to mediate. I haven't seen that since I've been up here. But we have used it in the not too distant past. And then administratively closed, it depends. Some people maybe retire before the investigation ends, or they resign in lieu of the investigation. We administratively close it, though we're collecting as much as we can in case we need to know more later. It doesn't change our investigation. We can still even reach out to see if they'd be willing to, but they're not required to anymore. And usually people don't want to come by and meet up with us on the days when they're not. They don't have to. In fact, a lot of people don't want to on the days they don't have to. And then just so that you guys are aware, the burden of proof is 51%, whether or not it's to be within policy or whatever the outcome is, the adjudication is. That's the burden of proof. And that's it. That's all I had.
All right.
Okay.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sweating. Well, thank you. And I'm I'm here every week if you guys have, or every month if you guys have questions. I try and remain approachable mostly.
Do we have any questions for Acting Lieutenant Jensen?
Good question. I was just curious about if you and Griffin moved into these positions, like applied for and wanted them, or?
Wow.
I was
Yeah.
thinking like the interpersonal dynamics would be.
No,
complicated.
thank you. It is complicated.
Somebody realized.
My deputy chief's behind me, so I. Man, I was sweating before. No, actually, it is something I applied for. I competed for, and I wrote a memorandum for my reasons on why I wanted to do it. And I interviewed and somehow was successful, right? In fact, Sergeant Griffith, the same thing. He actually competed with several people as well. So though this isn't like maybe not the most popular position within the department, man, I think how cool it would be if when I'm done with this, I can go be a sergeant on a team. And then like, hey, I don't know what we're doing. Let's go figure it out, right? And then we go and we learn something, and maybe I learned it wrong. And I can say, hey, I messed up and I'm sorry. And then I come back and I show the officers, look, it's gonna be okay. Like I just had mine and I'm okay. We're all here, right? I think it's a good place to learn how the process works, because I mean, you guys learned it in 15 minutes. We live it and we're still scared because we don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so being able to have that knowledge and then moving forward in a career being like, hey, I know you're stressed because this is some of the most stressful moments of your life. And it really is. You do everything you can to help people. And then somebody asks, why'd you do it like that? And it's like, this is the best I knew at the time. I'm sorry, right? Being able to say, hey, it seems like everything's coming at you, but guess what? It's gonna be okay. And here's likely an outcome, right? And that's kind of the reason why I did it. I can't speak for other people, but I know other people, that's the reason they do it. And then some people do it just because they think, hey, this is gonna look cool on a resume later.
Sure.
So
Can I follow up on that? Is there like a set term of service?
there used to be, it was 3 years when I applied, which is in about 6 months.
Because he's like coming up on his timeline. That's why.
Are you able to reduce it, or it's like?
He's out of here, right?
Yeah.
So in 6 months, I'll go back and have no friends. It'll be good.
Seriously, is it built in that like you do one term and then you're off for?
No,
Kind of for certain reasons.
so generally they allow 3 years, and then they've actually lifted that. They said, you can stay longer if possible. I know there was a sergeant before me that was there for about 5 years. And so it depends.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What do you think is one thing people get wrong about IA?
Man, I watched a lot of 80s movies
Sure.
growing up, and I thought we were all jerks. I'm the only jerk I know in my office. No, I think it really is that, you get the idea that people are out to get you, right? And realistically, it's fact finding. And sometimes I feel, and I don't know if you've seen it in some of my reports, but I feel like, there's some questions that have to be asked. And if you don't give somebody an opportunity to answer to something that might sound like harsh, then nobody will ever know, right? And so I think the idea that people are headhunting in internal affairs, I think there's a reason that people think that, but also I think there's more of a reason that you get a finally answer to the questions that are coming. And so I think that would be it. Yeah, I think I rambled, but.
Sorry.
I have another question. I'll keep playing the newbie card for as long as I can.
Me too.
3 months. I don't, my term is what, 3? Anyway.
You got yours,
I
yeah.
have yours. On one of those charts you had, that the IA and the IPA, is that what you are?
That's a beer.
Yeah, I know, but. The police auditor's office, both make a recommendation or adjudication to the chief. And I guess the question is, the chief has final decision. I think we all learned that already. And how often are the 2 suggestions different versus the same?
I
Or
would
maybe
say-
it's not tracked, I don't know.
I would say they're often the same.
Often the same.
I'd say that usually everybody kind of comes to a consensus. So,
No, cool.
but I don't have a ratio
Gotcha.
available for you, but.
John, on the risk claims, are they handled differently in terms of relying on insurance company to do some of the work, or how does that happen?
Risk claims are, it's when somebody calls in and makes a claim about some sort of risk. We just assess whether or not,
There's- Police violation,
Mhm.
okay.
And it's similar to- It's similar to uses of force or vehicle pursuits or anything else. In our database that we share with IA, we can see all those as they come in, so we have visibility into them. Very often, things that are risk claims already had other things in the system that we've looked at, but sometimes no.
Mhm.
So we can also see those if there were something that we thought was problematic to write an allegation against it, but that hasn't happened that I recall. But anyway, we also have visibility into the risk claims, I guess is my broader
I
point.
guess it's, and we also see every use of force, show of force, every pursuit, every allegation, every accommodation. Am I missing anything? The other- And the risk claims.
Yeah.
Lost, yeah,
Yeah, lost property.
lost property.
Tactical vehicle
Damaged property.
deployments, damaged property.
It really is like, when I describe it as a window into what we do, at the end of the weekend, Monday, they have, 20 different things, brand new things to review and look at, shows of force versus uses of force and all the different things. And then we provide video and different things like that so that it can be assessed, looked at and understood. Yeah.
And it sounds like a small thing. It's kind of a small bureaucratic thing to have this shared window, but in a lot of jurisdictions that have civilian oversight, this is a major point of contention and weakness in their system. That we have shared access and live visibility, live like up to the minute visibility is a really big deal in terms of our ability to do our job. And also, hopefully, it like lessens the burden a little on them because they don't have to be the total conduit of information because we have direct access.
And, it's not just because we're in this environment, but what's nice is we work well with the auditor's office. And so, when they ask, hey, is there a video for this yet? We're able to provide that quickly and vice versa. Amanda and Beatrice are very receptive when we have a question or something like that. And so it's nice to have an ability where we can kind of understand on the same level and move forward with some good faith.
Thanks. Like you said, as far as the intake goes, if you send an email or about a complaint about EPD to the chief, or you send it to a city councilor, it gets routed to us. So it's really with just the conduit, but I mean, carrier pigeon. We'll take it, as long as we get a look, and everyone's really good within the city about making sure it comes to us, which is not always the case with other cities necessarily. And their structures too. Oversight.
I think we have time for one more question.
I think we're past our 15 minutes, but.
Like, give me a.
What's the procedure for managing conflicts between, as in like if you're conflicted because of your relationship with the person who has a complaint?
Sure, and that's where we lean heavily on our ERC. So I said ERC, that's employee resource, so that's human resources, right? And so employee resource center. And so we kind of rely on them a lot. And the hard part is, right, it's 24 hours a day and it's a big office with a lot of different people, a lot of different groups. And so we, especially if something's alerted and known, we do our best to make sure that reporting parties feel safe, heard, and especially safe, and we work to mitigate as much potential cross as we can, right? So we put a lot of effort into separating parties and making sure that the investigation is thorough and appropriate. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Did you mean conflict of interest?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't,
It's okay. to-
sorry, I thought that was
Things are relevant. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
It was not. It's been a long day
Yeah.
for everyone.
So if there's a conflict of interest as far as what? Sorry.
I mean, my initial thought when you said the captains of, they're captains. I mean, I don't know how that's not a conflict of interest, just sitting here, but, or something where perhaps two officers are related or married.
Sure.
Any other scenario, or even if that you've worked together for so long, you have a friendly relationship, how does the EPD manage that conflict of interest
Yeah.
for investigation?
So we do have some married couples and they don't work on the same team. One doesn't supervise the other. Those kinds of things are taken into account. When I was initially hired in internal affairs, they said, hey, who do you not feel comfortable like conducting investigations for? And I named 3 really close friends that I work with, right? So I think we're pretty open about, one, we try and be incredibly honest and fair about it. And realistically, if one comes up and I didn't think of that person as somebody I'm very close with, and then, maybe I just, there's something about it, I don't want to participate in this. That's why we can assign it out. We can also, on rare occasions, assign them to previous internal affairs investigators, especially if like myself and the Sergeant Griffith have a close relationship with somebody. So there's ways to mitigate some of those things. And then, those are some of the ones that stand out that are current and that are recent.
And if I can add in, if we think that there's an issue, we are authorized by the statute to hire an outside investigator. Not that it happens very often, but that's also a possibility. So if one of these 2 got in trouble, then that's exactly what happened.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We have oversight for ourselves too. Yeah. So.
Sorry for making clear it's conflict of interest.
No, I'm sorry.
I was like,
I'm giving you all the information. Who cares? I don't even know what your question is. I'm gonna give you the. That was well over my 15 minutes now. The hardest question. Just kidding.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate your time. Lieutenant is it right for me to say acting Lieutenant Jensen every time, or?
You can just call me John. I'm not huge into
Like that.
titles, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in maintaining the, respect for your position in terms of like public meetings.
Sure, I get you.
So,
You can call me Sergeant Johnson.
perfect.
And yeah, when it's solidified later, if it ever does. Yeah.
Where's your boss again? Oh, yeah.
Got really warm in here.
Really, thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you.
We are gonna take a 5-minute break. It's 6:08. Let's make it a 6-minute break and come back at 6:15.
I'm not gonna support this.
talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Cameras.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we are at the case review section of our agenda. We have an allegation of use of force and acting Rob Eller. Lindsay Foltz will be giving us a.
I'm Vanna White. I'm just gonna make Rob, slides go forward. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Um,
new.
so I'm going to share the screen and have the slides, and then Rob will narrate them. If for some reason we have technical difficulties, I will do my best to fill in. Okay. So Rob, if you can unmute yourself. You can go. Just 1 second. Hey, Rob. I can see you, but I don't hear you yet.
Now?
Good job.
All right, no more headphones. All right. So we've got our case summary. So we've got a case review. It's an allegation regarding a use of force. So here are the summary of facts. So in August of 2025, Officer A was dispatched to a call for a disorderly subject, who we're going to call the suspect, in Eugene. Officer A arrived at the incident location and contacted the suspect. Moments later, a cover officer arrived and assisted Officer A in the arrest of the suspect for disorderly conduct. After the suspect was placed in handcuffs, he or she asked what crime had been committed. Officer A told the suspect that he or she was prohibited from showing his or her genitalia in public and was under the influence of illegal drugs. The suspect denied Officer A's allegation of indecent exposure and became argumentative and combative. The suspect requested Officer A show leniency, not arrest and not lodge him or her in the Lane County Jail. Officer A transported the suspect to the Lane County Jail for the arrest. When Officer A removed the suspect from the patrol vehicle, he or she became despondent and expressed anxiety about spending time in jail. Inside the jail pre-booking room, Officer A told the suspect to sit on a bench 2 times. The suspect did not sit and stepped towards the doorway of the pre-booking room. Officer A grabbed the suspect, redirected him or her away from the doorway, and pushed him or her downward towards the bench. The suspect lost his or her balance, fell into the bench, and struck his or her mid-torso. The suspect loudly expressed pain from the contact with the bench. Officer A lifted the suspect to a seated position on the bench. Moments later, 2 Lane County Sheriff's deputies entered the pre-booking room and took custody of the suspect. And it's noteworthy, the suspect was handcuffed when he or she was in the pre-booking room. In Officer A's internal affairs interview, he or she denied his or her handling of the suspect violated policy. Officer A stated he or she used a reasonable amount of force, expressed concerns regarding the suspect's potential escape, and denied he or she acted out of frustration. Officer A acknowledged the handling of the suspect in the pre-booking room was instinctive and not based on training. So we had 1 allegation, so 800 use of force, that Officer A used force against a handcuffed suspect in the Lane County Jail booking room in August 2025 in violation of policy. So the adjudication recommendations, and we'll go more into the details of the chain on the next slide, but so allegation use of force, the auditor sustained, the top of the chain sustained, and then the chief ruled insufficient evidence. And then this was an external complaint generated the investigation, and then we've covered the use of force, but it's noteworthy, the adjudication recommendations. So in the chain of command, the sergeant and the lieutenant, who both wrote memos, and then the captain concurred, said within policy. The deputy chief wrote a memo and recommended sustaining the allegation. And the chief's final adjudication was insufficient evidence. And of course, the auditor's office recommended sustained. And then I won't read that, but that's the materials that we provided y'all so you could make the review. And there's one more slide left, and it's just the thank you, and we'll let y'all take it away.
Okay. So we normally, just as a reminder, do hold this conversation through 3 rounds of discussion. The first round being in comments about intake, classification, and monitoring. The second round with comments pertaining to relevant policies, practices, and training considerations. And the third round for discussions of adjudication recommendations. So I think for tonight, since we moved our opening comments to this section of the agenda, we'll do a 0 round of discussion for opening comments, then we'll move on to intake, classification, monitoring, and I'll ask Josh to open us up with some opening comments.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, first I want to say, and I keep saying I'm new, but like actually a little bit of my background, I actually worked in this field a little bit as a volunteer in 2 East Coast cities, New York and Boston. New York during high school and law school, and Boston during college, which is all a long time ago. So when as some of you may know from my application here, I kind of want to use that knowledge, but also know that we're in a different city and a different place, and this role of the CRB is different. So I'm actually really interested in these type of things. So some of the things I may ask or comment on may sound a little bit elementary because I'm sort of using what I've learned, albeit 30 or more years ago, to what today is and what this CRB is and what Eugene is, which is very different from those other cities. So to that end, the one main opening comment I want to make is that I just want to say I'm really glad to be part of the Citizens Police Academy. I think well, you spoke last week, but two others here I think are also in that. And I don't know if others have done that or not, but I've only had one class so far, but I recommend it. I think it's really interesting and I hope it helps me kind of in this role as well. So I just wanted to mention that and to publicly thank you, Deputy Chief, for your comments last week.
Very well, thank you.
So that's all. Sorry.
Thank you. No,
I do not believe I have any comments.
thank you. Brittany, are you sure, Rick?
Don't even look.
I'll just open by saying, I always appreciate the thoroughness of the investigations, just in general, not speaking to this one in particular, but, you know, as this one demonstrates and is often the case, there are disagreements, among folks in these processes, and I always appreciate the thoroughness with which those disagreements are documented. And so that's where I'll start.
Great, thank you. I think it's always worth mentioning or expressing a sense of gratitude to the folks that work in this office. Not too long ago, all of the case review material was given to us in like physical binders, and just want to shout out to Amanda for doing the work of compiling all this information for us and all the behind the scenes of Microsoft Office and all that. Since, you know, we all love working with Microsoft Office and things and all that stuff. Thanks to Beatrice, Lindsay and Rob and Craig for running a great ship and doing a valuable public service that I think we are really lucky to have. Thanks for bringing a diverse perspective, Josh. I don't think you need to apologize for that. Just like that was worth knowing. Thank you. Okay. We're gonna move on to a round of intake, classification, and monitoring. And we'll start out with Noah for this round.
As far as intake, and correct me if I missed something, I do believe it all came internally, started day of with the footage. So I appreciate the quick response from the officers in that regard. Classification, I know there were in the adjudication recommendations some contention over the classification, but I'm not familiar enough with all of the policy to know what else it should be classified as. And I don't remember seeing someone offering an alternative. So I don't have any issue with that. Isn't neither any comment in the negative as far as monitoring as well. But just want to note that I did notice the classification disagreement, but I don't know what else it would fit under.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I just also appreciated that, the sheriff's office was a part of flagging this too, and, partnership and respect between the two agencies, to act on what was flagged, I think initially by LCSO staff. And I was trying to decide if this was related to intake or the adjudication recommendations, but I just wasn't very clear on the chief's memo, that drew him to determine insufficient evidence. If I understood correctly, he was saying he wasn't clear, that the allegation wasn't specific enough. I just was this question to the room, like, is that what it was saying?
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Is there a particular section of the CBA about allegations and specificity?
Well, let me start off by acknowledging that I was not part of the chain of command of this adjudication for discipline. So I've reviewed the adjudication documents and the video and stuff like that. So I can speak to speak to the question I think at hand, which is like specifically the policy. And you mentioned the CD, the collective bargaining agreement. So there are a couple of issues here, I think, what the chief is referencing. And so I don't speak on behalf of the chief all the time. I do think I can in some of the circumstances here. I think he's a stickler for process, and it's less about the incident and more about the broad classification of the allegation. There's particular, this is a pretty big policy, policy 800 use of force. And so there are points in the policy when you're talking about objective reasonableness of a use of force, like 802.2. So there are more specific points of the policy to point to. It's and basically what I think the chief meant was that it was difficult to come to find anything but insufficient evidence because it was an overly broad allegation. And it's not a violation of policy to use force against a handcuffed subject, which is what was part of the allegation. So I can speak to personal experiences and use of force and standards for reasonableness and stuff. So, and also not wanting to be precedent setting for something that was believed that if it were to go forward would be potentially go to a grievance or an arbitrator down the road. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And is there, so from our lesson earlier tonight, it's the auditor in the auditor's office that determines the allegation language. And is there a process where that could have or can be flagged earlier on as being too vague or something? Yeah, and can be adjusted.
I think there's a difficult balance between being too specific and too vague. And I think that's where we're trying to narrow down. I think if you get too specific, then the person go, oh, you said on August 5th and it actually happened on the 6th, then you're not guilty because you got the date wrong. I think what we're shooting for is that somebody should be able to look at the evidence and look at the charge and know what we're alleging. That's kind of where we're getting.
Okay. Makes sense.
There's an email in there that you can look at too that should explain the thought process a little bit. So I will own this one. So Craig was just starting. So I was drafting allegations since he was like coming in the door. The email will show there were like, I don't know, more than 5 specific parts of the policy that all seemed to apply. My thinking in lumping it into generally, this policy has been violated, is that it doesn't make sense to me to stack the allegations and say you violated this and this and this and this and this. So I would say you violated the policy more broadly for these series of reasons that I articulated. So in the development of the allegation, that thought went into it. And what Craig said was totally accurate. You want to be fair to the employee in that they need to understand what they're answering for, what your problem is. It needs to be specific enough that it's clear to them what has been alleged. And it needs to be general enough to account for the fact that we haven't done interviews or completed the investigation when we're writing the allegation. So you're always flying a little bit blind when writing the allegation because you don't know exactly what you're going to find actually, right? So you wouldn't necessarily have things like the medical records to see if the person was injured or these kinds of, so you're just trying to kind of like capture as much as you can. So
Okay.
if that, I don't know if that's helpful for like a behind the scene look at the process, and that we tend to review them amongst ourselves or if there's some like major issue. So it is the auditor's right to level the allegation as they see fit, and it's not done in a vacuum.
Right, in that collaboration.
Yeah, I don't know if that helps give some insight into that.
Oh, sorry, deep breath. I mean, there's a just cause standard by labor law that's required, and the employee, when they're noticed for an allegation, needs to understand what it is that they're speaking to when they come in for an interview. And there are opportunities during the process to update that just cause standard. And so I think that's what made it complex and difficult to reach a adjudication that everybody could agree on.
I think it's worth mentioning the chief is not involved in the drafting of the allegations.
Yeah,
But anyway, just
just
be
it's the
clear.
final product.
Yep.
I'll just close my thoughts in saying like, if this was a sustained allegation and there was legitimate violation of this policy, but there wasn't action that was able to be taken because the labeling of it deemed the chief to say insufficient evidence. That feels like a bummer to me.
I think I'll just withhold my comments. I think that the classification was okay. I kind of agree with the chief that needs to be, the allegations being more specific. And in this respect, I would suggest that the allegations such as that the excessive force was involved, the fact that the person was in handcuffs at the time, did not have adequate ability to protect themselves. So, that was really the guts of the issue. Not just I don't think the handcuff itself means that you're in violation.
Correct.
It means that you use excessive force.
Or what's reasonable may shift based
Right.
on the fact that you can't defend yourself, that you are less likely to be able to harm other people, that your escape might be hindered, that you know, like.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I guess couple of things. One, there's a tension here for me. On one hand, I don't want our officers to have these stacked huge allegations, right? Where it's like, you did this and then you did the 0.21, 0.22. Especially, I mean, there are parts, it's referential. And so like, you know, by saying 0.22, that it references the objective reasonableness standard, you need to allege that they weren't objectively reasonable, which is defined differently elsewhere. What my takeaway from the alleging the whole policy is that it could have been, it apparently should have been narrower to survive the chief's adjudication for insufficient evidence. I do appreciate the auditor's office trying not to have an avalanche. Tough balance. I guess we know that alleging a whole policy is too big. That's my takeaway from this. The only other thing was including handcuffing in it for me. I don't know that it added a lot, the allegation in a way that like just the reasonableness piece wouldn't have. Certainly, I mean, it catches your eye to have an allegation that they violated the use of force policy for using force against a handcuffed subject in violation of policy. But I think it's too fact specific, not enough policy, right? Unless there's of course policy that says don't do that, but as the chief pointed out. I'll save that for training. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
I think that's a really astute point. So like, of course, because of the outcome, I went back to see, what would I do? What have I learned? And I think I would have written an oddly more general and specific at the same time of use force in excess of that which was reasonably necessary on this date and time. That would have been it.
Yeah.
So you got it, nailed it.
I'm a bit frustrated with the outcome given.
Thank you. I want to say that I've been on the Civilian Review Board since 2020. And this is not the first time this officer has admitted to acting out of a reaction. And we have seen this there's a pattern of behavior for this officer. And I mean, I think I want to just quote what DC. Are we allowed to use, is it appropriate to use names? No.
Not really.
Okay, what the DC at the time had mentioned in their memo, the first sentence, the facts of the incident are not in doubt and captured on pre-booking video. If you see what I believe I saw on the video, it's kind of indisputable as to as I see it, whether, okay, I don't believe that this was like an appropriate use of force. And I don't necessarily know that this was necessary to prevent. The officer said, I did this to prevent them from somewhere like escaping or leaving the facility, and it just seems kind of silly to follow that. We can debate, I don't know, the particulars of like policy, but it's kind of like why people, how it's kind of like how people get upset in the last minutes of like a basketball game. Should we call fouls the same we call fouls throughout the rest of the game? Should they change at the end of the game, even if they determine the out? Should we call fouls harder or softer? And I guess it kind of depends on how you read that, what your hermeneutic is for it. Should we be consistent? Whether this officer does or does not have lots of allegations, I don't know. That's up for debate. All right. This next round, we will. I'm so sorry.
That's a, no.
Thank you.
I could just say ditto to everyone. No, I start by saying both with intake classification monitoring and the rest of it, it's troubling, the whole situation. Let me just say, I don't want to repeat people. Brittany, I like your point about the sheriff's office. And I think that, you know, the more we see different law enforcement agencies that working together, I think the better. And this, if I may, kind of is very different from last month's meeting when we were talking about different law. Well, I don't know that ICE is law enforcement, but putting that discussion aside, I just think it was nice to follow it up with this. Let me see. Handcuff was talked about. Trying to get the right call, so to speak. I was hearing people say too specific or too broad. I start thinking, was it Three Little Bears? The porridge is too hot or too cold? That's right. Glad I don't have
Goldilocks.
Goldilocks. Yeah, I'm glad I don't have your job. Although one question I do have, and I don't know where this would come in during the three-part discussion, so I may mention it now, and then if it's a better place for it. But bring my job into it. I run a charter public agency. I always want to look at the CBA as well. And I wonder if, and maybe it's a more general question, how rights in the CBA intersect with all the stuff we're talking about today, the IA, the auditors, you know, all that. Because I know when we get questions where I work, we look at the law, our policy manual, and then the CBA. We have two unions. And so I don't know enough about that. I'm just curious how that fits in. And like I said, I don't know where that would fit into today's discussion, but I just want to tag it. Or go ahead.
I think it's okay to post this right now, and if can we invite DC to?
Yeah, I don't have the CBA sitting in front of me, but I'm guessing that it refers to Oregon law and labor law as in regards to how employees should be treated through a disciplinary process and stuff. So yeah, a broader conversation on what laws are, you know, the rights of the members involved in the disciplinary process. So there is an aspect of the CBA, to your point earlier. I agree.
And to that end, when I think of, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say Article 36, if you're interested.
Of the CBA?
There you go.
Is that a public, I assume.
Yeah, it's
public
up,
document?
yeah.
Okay, I'll check. And to that end, when I think of just cause and due process and that kind of thing, and with all respect to what you said earlier, Chair, I wonder, is it relevant to the discussions that happened or what we're having tonight, whether or not a particular officer had a past or not of, and I don't know, is that a hot topic to bring up? I'll play the new card again.
Can I
yeah.
say how I think about it?
Yeah,
It's
please.
the only way to think about it.
Yeah.
When it comes to the the allegation, the investigation, it's its own thing.
Yeah. Okay.
To me, separate that off as something that doesn't fall into our purview, which is discipline.
Yeah.
So whether or not the thing happened is what we're sort of establishing here. And then what happens if it did happen is sort of over here. And that's where that comes more.
As a later
into
question.
play.
Yeah, that makes
Now, I
sense.
would say that sounds really clean and sometimes it's a little more complicated than that. Let's say you have a series of events that all happen in an extraordinarily short time frame. That's gonna be a little bit different than what I'm saying. I'm not opening 3 completely separate investigations. I'm gonna look at it as an incident. Does that make sense? But that's not really part of what we're doing.
And that makes sense.
Yeah, unless there's some specific facts that means that we need to look at something else, but no, like a frequency of is more, I categorize that mentally as more like an issue that is handled at the disciplinary phase. If you make the same mistake over and over again, then there's a progressive discipline process.
That makes sense.
And our office has nothing to do with that, right? We don't make any recommendations. We don't have any say. So
Thank you, that helps a lot.
if that,
I really
and that's
appreciate
just
that,
me,
yeah,
like
yeah.
different people might think that.
Okay.
I guess the only other thing I'd say, and I'm not an expert on labor law, but we're lucky here also to be in a department where this office has been around for almost 20 years. And so a lot of that really, really hard work in bargaining has already been hashed out. So we're in a pretty functional kind of homeostasis type environment. Not that people aren't gonna still like negotiate and that everything is settled for all time, but that there's sort of a rhythm to it that's very functional. So that's advantageous to us.
Appreciate that, thank you. I think that's all I have for now.
Okay. We are on to a discussion on relevant policies, practices, and training considerations. Okay, Noah, did you start out the previous conversation? Okay, we'll start with Brittany. Thank you.
Yeah, continuing the theme around kind of the LCSO and EPD element, I just had kind of a thought or a wondering around the distinctions of the use of force policies and procedures between the 2 agencies. Not asking anyone to speak to sheriff's office policy on that. I'm like kind of curious if that tends to vary very much between agencies or if it's pretty consistent.
Yeah, I can answer a little bit of that. So, the Lane County Jail has completely different policies and procedures because their environment is very much more controlled than outside, right? So even their patrol officers have a different policy than their corrections facility with. So generally, people in Lane County Jail, they're going to focus on their own personal policy. And I mean, I don't know if you remember how many policies we have. It's very difficult to keep in contact or keep control of our own, let alone to know and understand another agencies that might differ in some way. So when an officer or a corrections officer in Lane County Jail, they start their career in corrections and then they eventually get out to patrol. So even the corrections officers might not be familiar with Lane County patrol use of force policies and procedures, right? So that's a long way of saying we don't know theirs, they don't know ours.
Yeah.
And they're gonna be.
I would say a broader answer to that too is there's legislative factors that we consider when we're developing policy. There's accreditation factors that also involved in that. So each agency's policies may look a little different. And I can't speak to every agency and exactly how their policy looks, but based on like Graham factors and things that related to this particular incident and stuff are generally or should be by best practice and a use of force policy. So it's standardized and also duty to intervene or duty to report such said things. So those kinds of things.
I'm so sorry, Brittany,
Yeah.
I didn't interrupt you. I was just gonna ask if I could follow up. Did you tell us a bit about how accreditation plays into this or informs this?
I can speak kind of high level about accreditation. I'm not an expert in it, other than the fact that there is some legislative, there's some rules and laws surrounding the requirement for agencies to have a level of accreditation, and a lot of those go to the fact of like certain policies, procedures within an agency have to meet a certain standard based on the laws throughout the state and stuff. So there's entities outside of the agency that's like, I would say in layman's terms, like a consulting almost agency that comes in and does a very comprehensive review. And I'm speaking specifically to policy, but there's other layers of accreditation throughout the department, whether it's evidence control and other parts of the department stuff, but specifically the policy that will review it and make sure that it's in compliance with those standards that's throughout the state.
I see. That's helpful. Thank you. I just had not thought about the way that agencies craft policy based upon accreditation. I didn't even know that there was accreditation. So that's really helpful context, actually.
You're welcome. It's relatively new, actually, to the industry. And when I first started, it was not.
Okay. Thanks. Excuse me, Brittany.
And then I'm assuming EPD or any other agency adheres to their own policies, even if it's on site within the correctional facility, like that doesn't matter. Yeah, I just mostly just had me curious and even just thinking of like how those policies inform culture and what it feels like red flagging or not as folks were reacting in the moment. And also just to note that I did a ride along with EPD like a year ago, maybe, and actually was able to accompany somebody being booked in. So it was helpful, and shout out similarly to Josh to do ride along, to actually sit in the room that this officer was describing, which is small. I remember being in there kind of surprised a bit at how it was just the EPD officer and the person that they brought in, and then they turned to type on the computer. And I was especially intrigued by it because I was in the room with the person who was officer in the back. This person was perfectly fine and nothing happened. I'm like, okay, we're just gonna chill out here. So that was all like really helpful context to think about just this environment. And yeah, and the only other thing to call out training specific is I believe I read defensive tactics recommended a refreshed training on controlling a resistive handcuffed suspect / using force on a restrained person. And I would just agree with that and appreciated that it was already called out.
Thank you.
I agree with that too. I thought that the use of force sergeant who wrote a page and a half or so with two pages of the report suggested that bit of training, I think that'd be helpful. Whether it makes any difference or not, it's still an effort.
Certainly. Thank you, Rick.
Question first, EPD use lexical policies or some modification of lexical policies?
Yeah, I believe, yes, I believe, yeah. Sometimes uses a reference.
It's not a straight copy paste,
Yeah.
however, that.
Some agencies I'm aware do that. but
Distinction.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Yeah, I agree. This is the second incident we've reviewed recently with use of force against a restrained subject. And so I appreciated that call out because seems to be a recurring theme. In a way that is, restrained is different. I think that's maybe one of the grand factors is the ease of escape. Can't remember exactly the term, but so I appreciate that. And then good to know on modified lexical, but not lexical. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like this is always the $1 million question where we have conversations about use of force. How much bureaucracy is good bureaucracy? I get how much do you really want to micromanage a culture? And there seems to be some kind of golden mean there. And I don't offer this comment as a critique of EPD. I think that every time we have these discussions, and the context is certainly a little bit different each time, I find myself feeling less and less sure about any of it, to be honest. Because at one point you don't want to say you know, with extreme certainty that this is this is a systemic pattern and we've got to, micromanage it. And at the same time, we don't want to just simply look at them just in isolation as well. So I don't know about this one. As I mentioned, it's not the first time we've seen this officer, and I don't mean to like say this to come down on this officer or any other officer in particular. But agreeing, with Rick that this is a good first step, and I appreciate seeing that, also seeing that memo, and yeah, I'm just uncertain right now. So a kind of non-comment. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, no, and I probably was a little bit unfair and we're talking about that issue that you had brought up. I mean, at all to disparage what
Absolutely.
you said. I think from the CBA standpoint, like there are certain things, and again, this is more hypothetical, but if someone has, let's just say, and it may not be with police and the CBA, but just as an example, someone has, let's say, a written reprimand in their file. There's state law, there's CBAs, et cetera, that could say that if you don't do something related to that topic in 3 years, it gets purged.
Sure.
And I don't know enough about the laws in this area or the CBA. I'll look at that section of this thing.
At least we'll know.
But more generally, but I totally respect, and the answer you gave was exactly what I was hoping and thinking it would be, which is every situation it's a unique situation. We can't, it's against the police officer's due process rights, to have investigation it's almost like an implicit bias if you have, oh, I know this name, I don't like it from before, for even good reasons, perhaps. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah.
But I share a lot of what your concerns are too.
How would you think about that? Sorry, I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
in an HR context? As a
So-
matter of
so-
comparison, rather than
I will say-
direct to-
My punt on that to not answer that question is the agency where I work, we don't have law enforcement, we don't have fire, we don't have a marina, we don't have all these wonderful things
Sure.
that I've learned in the HR world you don't want to have if I think it's hard. I think it's really hard. And I will bring some of my bias from the past. And like I mentioned, it's two big cities. It was 30 something years ago. And I think I'm a different person in many ways. I have different perspectives in many ways. But there's sort of, I think everything's more nuanced in general. And I think there are, and this is not a comment on Eugene at all, but I think nationally, and we look at Minnesota and we look at some of the past in New York and things like that. And I know I'm going a little bit off tangent for our purview, but there's some people who will say, well, police unions, all they're there for is to protect their members. And I'm thinking, well, unions are there to protect their members. And I think that the way that becomes a pejorative statement when someone makes it that way, and I know I'm setting up a straw person to knock them down, that's not really fair, but is that they're doing something evil, they're doing something bad. And so I think, it's good to take a step back and just kind of look, and this is what your job is, and your job, Craig, and everyone in your office is to kind of look at the incident that happened then. And I assume, if I may, John, or Lieutenant, IA office too. I mean, you look at what's in front of you, correct? So I just think it's interesting. I don't know I have answers to it, but I guess I pose questions. I'm not sure where that takes us, but I think it's helpful to have those discussions. So that was a non-answer answer to your HR question.
Very, very smart. Yeah, great game call.
Wait,
You guys so much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Sorry to stick out. Joy, thank you. Good luck and appreciate it.
is this still your turn, right? Or is it up to me now? I can't remember.
It's,
Is that my?
you have the floor.
Okay, let me see if I have anything more to add. I will make one comment again. Sorry to keep piggybacking on things you say, Brittany, but yeah, no. No, I want to mention the ride along thing that you mentioned, and I don't know who to turn to. I hesitate to turn to you, Deputy Chief, but I don't think part of the academy is a ride along per se, right? Okay, although I think it would probably be a good idea in general for people to do it. And I did one. Now it was, God, I wasn't even like 14 years ago. It's a long time ago. And I later would tell friends, of course, hey, I was in jail because I got to jail. Or hey, we arrested someone. I didn't really have much to do with arresting that, right? And it must have been that long because it was actually the old City Hall building, which is not even here anymore, because they found someone who had a some kind of violation, parole or probation violation, something, and they found that he was there. And anyway, but so I do recall that one room, and I recall that one room being very small with one bench. And I don't know enough information as to how the Lynn County Jail is structured, if there's more than that one room that I personally saw myself, or if they've built more or it's different. So going through this case, that was sort of what I had in the back of my mind, and maybe that wasn't really fair. But picking up on what you said, Brittany, it seems to me it's a very small area. I don't know which way that cuts either way, but I guess I'm looking for help if anyone knows or has been to the
I got
jail.
good news for you because
Tell me.
your participation in the academy, you're gonna get to go to jail again.
Oh, we do a jail tour. That's right.
Correct.
That's right.
I don't believe much has changed other than they have a lot more video cameras now, which in this case were particularly helpful for using.
They still won't take you even if you ask them.
But say again, Rick?
Stay Kennedy, and I know that you can.
Yeah.
We'll try to let him out of jail after.
I don't know. Well, thank you.
DC?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I wanted to take the time. I think all of the comments are really good and specifically surrounding like experiences and getting to know like the area in which this occurred and stuff. But another plug for the Citizens Police Academy and stuff is this group has a super honorable job to look at these things like the accountability of actions of our officers and use of force and stuff like that. And there's the opportunity in that academy, not only to look at like these locations that we might be talking about, but also to experience like defensive tactics or confrontation simulation type thing, or driving, emergency vehicle operations and stuff. So things that give you then lived experience to be able to kind of speak to the reasonableness of maybe something that we're reviewing in video or 2D or over reports and stuff like that. So just wanted to take it as a plug, and I appreciate the commentary and discussion.
And I would guess it's probably only 2 people in this room, maybe 3, Craig, who have actually driven a police vehicle before.
So much.
Anyone else? I'm not sure. But anyway, let me see if I have anything more on that before we move on. I'm sorry. Training, restrained subject, right? No, I think I got it all. Yeah, thank you.
If anybody wants to do a ride along, just reach out to me and I will try to make those arrangements.
I can help as well. But
Yeah, thank you. No,
Not gonna lie, I think we have gotten above my level of understanding with collective bargaining. I don't know anything about employment law, so I got lost for a long time in there.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I get to learn about employment law. Super fun. To learn policy and training and recommendations, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they had in the memo about the use of force training. I have been to the jail, but not the pre-booking area, since we're talking about going to jail. But I can talk more about that next time. And I don't know if I have anything to add other than it kind of goes back to the intake and classification, the policy of the insufficient evidence, where with the collective bargaining agreement and due process, where I got lost there for a moment. I don't know, for to a bit, it just seems all academic to worry about that when there are multiple components of the 800 policy that were mentioned and specified. And I don't know.
sure.
That's all I'm coming to have on policy and the training.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I'm not forgetting you, right, Brittany? You started us out.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll start out our final, our final round of discussion will be on adjudication recommendations. Rick, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, for schedule, I'll go on with the chief on this one. I think that it is within policy, and the reason why is that I don't think that it's a violation of policy to say that you cannot use force on a person with handcuffs on. That's the way it's alleged, and that's the way it needs to be handled. And, I've tried a lot of cases in my life, and most of them hinged on whether or not the allegation was proved. And if the allegation was too broad or too narrow or whatever, when you make an allegation, it's either too big, too little, too fast, too slow, too all encompassing or not encompassing enough. It's a very difficult thing, and people don't realize that. It's very hard. And a lot of people tend to just gloss over that and think that that's gonna accomplish their, just by getting into court, they're gonna win their money and go home. That's not how it works, and I think that while it came out of the blue, the chief's ruling on this was correct, that everybody assumed that because the guy had handcuffs on, he shouldn't use force on him. Well, then you have to go back, really, was it reasonable for the guy to use the force he used? And one of the things he needed to look at was whether or not the guy was in handcuffs. I'll grant you that. On the other hand, you can't expect a cop to be a god and be able to shed aside everything that was said to him by this person over the time, the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes, 2 hours or whatever, how the guy's been treating him. And if you gave this to 30 reasonable police officers, I'm not sure how it would come out. Yeah, they were trying to press. So I think I go along with the chief on lack of free policy.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, I think, so I'll start with the chief's insufficient evidence. I didn't like the chief's insufficient evidence argument, I think from the allegation, I think it was, and seemingly in the chief's adjudication, it was even kind of clear the chief, what we were talking about objective reasonableness in the circumstances. I found myself fairly convinced by actually the lower rungs of the chain of command. But as I thought about it more and more, I think this kind of is within policy. It's one of these where it looks really bad. Like you can look at it on it. I once heard it said that there are no good looking uses of force. And as I do this more and more, I think that might be true. But this is one where there's a range of reasonableness from the least amount of reasonable force to the most amount of reasonable force. And I don't think any more force was reasonable. If he went to directed strikes, if he didn't have any tools, so he wouldn't have tased him, but if he tased him, I think Officer A's use of force would have been unreasonable had they gone any further. But with what the subject was displaying in terms of both level of intoxication, in terms of failing to follow lawful orders, in terms of, we talk about the crime of arrest. This is an interesting one, right? I think the subject ended up being a disorderly conduct, but I don't, as the allegation talked about, I think there is a level of threat that comes with exposing your genitals, that is beyond maybe what I would put in that ordinary, like I'm stepping out into the road, obstructing traffic category of crime. And as I thought about it more, I think it would have been reasonable for the officer to grab him. I think grab the subject. I think it also would have been reasonable for the officer to I think this is on the outer edge of reasonable, but I think it was reasonable for the officer to do this. The only other thing, as I watched the video again and again, is the slip of the feet, of the officer's feet. That to me was interesting because I don't know that you'd expect that you're going, I've never been in this room, but I don't know if I was on some regular work boots. I don't know that I would expect that I was gonna slip if I grabbed a subject and kind of pulled them towards a wall. And I think that was just kind of an unfortunate, the officer shifted away in a way that maybe made the force not what you would have expected in a moment. But ultimately, I think I would find within policy, as I think the lieutenant and the captain did prior to the higher up in the chain.
Thank you. And so you are, you're maintaining within,
I would do it within policy.
not insufficient evidence.
I don't think insufficient evidence. To me, I think the I think the allegation was sufficiently framed. In light of everything that was there, like I said, my main takeaway from the intake classification is apparently we should be, the auditor as an office should be leveling maybe slightly more. Either more allegations or broader, or maybe like subsection, but I think overall, I wouldn't have felt, having reviewed the CBA, I didn't see anything in there other than, just cause standard, right? I think the employee was on notice of what had occurred, and so I just disagree with the chief on that one.
Thank you. I want to say first that, Rick, I receive your point that allegations need, if I'm hearing you correctly, what I heard you say is that allegations need to be the grounds of discussion. And that it's important for us to be specific, and to be grounded within something, like a very specific policy. And, I received that, and I agree with that. I think that's, as far as fairness and justice goes, that's a good thing to be doing in general for everybody, right? I think that where I disagree with the chief, not necessarily Rick, of course.
I agree with her, because I spoke when I said the chief. I agree with the chief. I agree with
Sure.
within policy. The two other guys have.
Not insufficient evidence.
Not insufficient.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. No, that's very helpful. I think for me, it's not that there was force used, it's the amount of force that was used, and that's completely subjective. And I just want to admit that outright, that I think that that's also a really important or true, like pithy statement, that like no use of force is going to look good. There's an amount of that we have to accept. I just am not convinced by the insufficient evidence part of this. That's very confusing to me. I would be more willing to have a discussion around within policy than insufficient evidence. And yeah. Also, I think my standpoint is within the context of what officer said, in that like preventing escape was necessary to maintain custody and crucial to protect the public, correction staff, and themselves from potential harm. I think that's a kind of, I'm not making an assessment about whether what they're saying is true or not. I'm saying in the context, I'm gonna go with sustained, but I think this is one of the more weak sustained that I have felt so far. In the past, I've been like, I'm begrudgingly agreeing, within policy, and I think I might be at a place right now where I'm like begrudgingly sustained for the first time in 6 years of work. So yeah. Josh.
Wow. I have to say, I appreciate this conversation, because every time someone says something, I'm thinking, well, that makes sense. Well, that makes sense. Let me see a couple of thoughts. I agree with Elise and Jose about the within policy issue and kind of where that takes us. I think it's closer to the line, but again, I don't have a lot of experience in it, but just from seeing it as a person out there. I also, Rick, want to pick up something you said. You talked about some of your litigation experience in the past, and you were talking about people suing for, which of course is civil litigation. And my presentation talked about potential criminal litigation, where it's a whole different, well, probably not Lane County DA, because I presume they'd send it to a DA somewhere else, because Lane County DA works for the EPD, right? But it could go.
Yeah, sometimes they keep them depending.
Okay. And then I'm thinking, but not civil and not criminal, this is administrative, right? What we're doing here, I would say.
Say no, 51%.
Say again?
Burden of proof is
51%, more likely than not, as opposed to.
one problem about.
Probably, yeah. Which makes things sometimes easier, sometimes harder, I'm not sure which, so.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just took these facts and presented to a person on the street, you know. And that's not really useful exercise. Um, but it also shows, I think, why things are more nuanced, you know, like I said before. I also, um, and then one other thing related to that, I guess, is, and this maybe is more of a process question, but if you have a situation related to the auditor's office has one finding, and in this case, the DC had the same similar finding, albeit different from the chamber command, like, and the chief goes against both of those. I could see people asking, well, what's the appeal process? You know, you can see the person on the street, just to use that stupid example I just gave, saying, I want to take this all the way to the Supreme Court, not understanding it doesn't work that way. But I also wonder what other alternatives, if this person, what was the subject? Is that the word, right? It was not happy if they even knew about the adjudication process. I don't know what kind of follow-up they have and all that. But let's say they knew about it and are not happy, and then they look at our board as a sort of, well, you're gonna fix it. Well, no, we don't fix, that's not our role. What options do they have? I mean, obviously civil litigation. They could bring, in theory, I guess, go to the DA's office and say, I have a complaint about something. I don't know that the DA would necessarily, if at all, it's not how they do this. But I just wonder, is there other, within the structure of the police department, city of Eugene, et cetera, is there a quote appeal process? Is that a fair question? Am I asking, you know what I mean?
It's a fair question. I think this is a question for our deputy chief or Craig.
So there is no appeal process as far as the province of discipline is exclusively with the chief of police.
Okay.
So the CRB, there's an appeals process, which is where you get the cases if they don't agree with our decision.
Okay.
But not as far as discipline goes.
And let me flip it. I have another question. I'm sorry to keep bringing up CBAs, but like, if the chief rules that something is just, what's the right word I want to use? Sustained, right? The sustained. I gather there's probably something in the CBA
Yes.
agreements, right? That's what I was assuming. So that's kind of interesting too. I'm just sort of on that level, but
That's what I spoke to, I'm sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
That's what I spoke to earlier, and I agree with Craig, but you kind of almost, Josh, answered
Yeah,
your own question, because like this is a part of the oversight and of the process. And then there's also other remedies that potentially the person could seek, which is civil, or like you said, even request a review from the DA or something. So there are other potential remedies, whether it fits or not, is depending on the scenario and stuff. So, but yes, there is a potential for a grievance by the union,
Right.
and then even all the way to an arbitrator, depending on how that gets run.
Having defended these cases in my
yeah,
lifetime, I would say that all you need to do is show that videotape of that guy in the back of the car. And then, you know, the jury would be out 15 minutes, maybe gone.
And deputy chief, to clarify, what you just spoke to would be administrative, not civil or criminal, right? Yes, okay.
I'm sorry, no, there's three people who have gone to law school at this table. I know you're just doing it right now, but one other thought, you just said something there. I was gonna. So you can still quit now? No. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. And again, this goes.
Third year.
Oh, you can't quit now then.
Right, it is.
First year they scare you, second year they work you to death, and third year they bore you to death, right?
Yeah.
One question I have too, and sorry to, again, this may be a little bit tangential, but I'm thinking a lot about all this stuff, and I think it's a great conversation. I really appreciate it. As a CRB, I don't say we represent the public. What's a better way of phrasing that? I may turn to you, Craig.
Voice of the public.
Are we the voice of the public? I don't know what we are.
I think you're the public's eyes in
Yeah.
Okay.
in a sense, because, you know, we haven't, but we're not public. And
Right.
this is a chance for you to review cases, and you can always, people can ask for a case to be reviewed.
Right, right.
We can identify certain cases, and Jose and I regularly meet to discuss cases that you'd like to see as well as training, so.
And I guess I asked that question because I'm sort of thinking, we probably, I'm gonna hazard a bet that those of us on the board have not lived the life of a police officer in Eugene or that subject here in Eugene. So it's interesting that we have the ability, the power, the whatever it is, I don't know if power is the right word, but the opportunity to have these conversations. And one thing I might suggest, and I got to actually, I was on the 4J budget committee for 9 years, which was a long time. But one thing I started thinking about is who is not at the table. And that sounds a little bit cheesy, but hear me out. So like we are people on this board who have the time to do it on a Tuesday evening, to show up here, et cetera, et cetera. And so I just think that we keep that in mind as we ask questions going forward, at every meeting, et cetera. So I think I'll end on that.
That's helpful. And I think that is a matter of pursuing. I know that this is not a popular phrase anymore, but I still believe in it, like social justice. As a matter of social justice, asking who's at the table, whose voice gets represented, it should be a perennial question.
Yeah,
So thanks for the reminder on that.
I appreciate that.
Did you want to have your adjudication recommendation?
Oh, did I want to do what Elise said.
Okay. Okay. I'm thinking how to word my thoughts. I would honestly feel like lean more towards insufficient evidence for the allegation than within policy, but I also disagree with insufficient evidence for allegation because it feels like splitting hairs at that point. And because I'm rereading through this 800 policy right now, like the force in making an arrest or preventing an escape, and then looking at the factors, and then reading these adjudication memos and the determination of whether that was reasonable use of force. I haven't been in the pre-booking area. I've been in meetings in the client meeting rooms with attorneys where they are not handcuffed and they are accused of strangling people to death and whatnot. And I don't feel like I would be throwing someone unless they actively attacked me instead of walking out a door. And I'm not 230 pounds and trained to fight people. And I know that this officer is trained in defensive tactics as well. That combined with the interview of the officer stating that they had time to consider alternatives, but did not. There were some kind of inconsistencies between their statements and the pre-written statements in the interview of, did you consider this a threat? No, they were making threats in the car, but I wasn't taking it seriously, but they were actually serious. It seems like that they reacted instinctively, but at the same time, they state that they had enough time to think about alternatives and chose what they did. And I think for that reason, based on their own statements, I would go with sustained, because if you had enough time to think about it and you still chose to, what looked like, rewatching the video, place your foot behind to actively trip someone, which is a actual tactic used to get someone down, then you had enough time to hold on to them and make sure they don't fall and possibly bash their head into the wall or injure their spine. And I know that the nurse said that they didn't and didn't complain about it until later, but that's the same standard that I would apply with an officer saying that they're walking outside handcuffed and they could hurt someone in a secured jail with multiple officers. And I guess they could bite someone, but I don't know what else they would be getting done. That's what I'm finding.
I was opting for sustained as well. My thinking was, I think some of the justification that the officer provided was acknowledging the risk of an individual who appeared to be intoxicated or navigating psychosis, having superhuman strength, but looking at the video footage, I didn't see that level of aggression really show up at any time with that individual. So I was not sure about that. And to be fair, diagnosing is a really complex process, and so there was justification based off of assumption and a lot of experience in working with people who are intoxicated and or psychotic. So that's fair, but also to base a decision off of that as truly that assumption, and then behave accordingly with the choice with force. felt inappropriate to me as well as the setting. So I would agree with Jose as far as perhaps force was needed, but not much.
Thank you. Any follow-up comments, questions? Okay, one of the things that I would like to follow up on is a possibility, and I know where we're at on time. Do you think that a training topic at Lane County Jail would be a good idea? Or like a
It
field
has
trip?
been done.
I think that might be a good idea because I heard multiple people mention that this room itself was important context. And I would kind of like to see that. Empty.
A tour can be done.
I think that's a good idea. And especially, I think it'd also be important for us to see how like Lane County sheriffs and EPD articulate in cases like this. So, yeah,
Let me open my mouth again.
please.
It strikes me that Lane County Sheriff's Office was pretty critical of EPD on this. Without any basis. They had no responsibility until that was turned over to them.
Mhm.
They had no duty to do anything except stand there and watch. That's all they did, except they let a civilian person who's an assistant in one of the medical clinics walk out there through that area when they knew someone was coming in. This person actually walked to the garbage can or something, and they came back, was standing near the door when the victim of the subject brought in. And that to me was the one thing that made sense to me, that the officer had as a justification for using force, and that was to protect that person. The escape aspect of it really was, did sell me, I thought, here's a handcuffed guy in a locked jail.
Right.
Nobody's not gonna get any farther than 2 feet. Even the Lane County Sheriff's Office would tackle him up there.
Sure.
So, that person was a justification to me for the use of force in the first place. And so that was what that brought me to the realization that Lane County gets dumped the ball.
Mhm.
So I think you're right.
Yeah, I don't remember that part, and so I think I appreciate being reminded of that.
It struck me that maybe the EPD ought to go to the Lane County Sheriff and say, look, we're in this together. We're gonna be bringing people into you regularly. We need to have your cooperation on this, not to shut the door, not to not say anything when we're doing something wrong. That's fine. If you want to complain about what we've done, that's great. That's how we learn. But they need to look at it from the standpoint, well, it's not my prisoner until they turn them over to me, and I can observe and complain about what they do. I'm gonna jump in and help. They're standing right there.
And I have to imagine that there's I don't know the term, but like pretty clear policies for like handoff or
Something, I don't know.
is that right?
So, yeah, when, it depends, right? So if, there's been several times where you walk somebody into the pre-booking room, if they're starting to act out, deputies can be proactive, they can come out and receive the custody early. If the person's cooperative and seated and is willing to wait, then when we or an officer is done writing the reports and filling out the information that they have, they stand outside and wait, and then the door will open and somebody will come out and receive them. So it's not obvious, right? It's fluid.
Yeah.
If somebody's not cooperative, even before they come in, we stop early and then 6 or 7 deputies come out and pull them out of the vehicle. So there's a wide variety of potential responses from deputies at the jail.
So it sounds like we had contact about this before,
Um,
or sometime.
yeah, so not about this specific incident, right? But
Engaging,
Yes.
reacting together.
right.
Yeah, I mean.
And actually, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
We don't. If we call for help, we're often done unless there needs to be an immediate response, right? So if they're in the back of my car and they're going high and right and doing whatever it is they're doing, I either stay in my car or I step out, but I don't interfere with them connecting their stuff, because there's 7 or 8 people that have
Right.
trained together, work together, and know their policy. I'm not gonna jump in and grab an ankle and then break a foot and be like, well, sorry, guys, and then walk off. So, yeah.
A lot to what John was saying too, it's just like lived experience and being in those situations. You know, I myself have experienced people slipping cuffs within seconds or committing serious assaults against people while handcuffed as well. So it's kind of a combination of deputies in the jail being able to get there when they can, and who knows what these deputies were doing before this happened a while, thing, but I mean, there's a combination of those efforts.
It struck me that the civilian who was walking to the garbage can and came back and was standing there in the area described the event as totally inaccurately. She said that the police officer dumped him, I think her words were, he reacted by dumping him on his head. Now that's totally false. That was just that was an emotional reaction on her part. And that shouldn't be the basis for an investigation.
So I would say one thing that I learned from watching the video for this case for the allegation, I didn't do the whole case, so Rob wrote the adjudication recommendation, but watching it at the beginning, one thing that I learned was depending on what angle you were at, you may or may not have been able to see where if his head contacted something or not. So for example, from the officer's body worn camera, view is not definitive. Really, it wasn't until I had the bird's eye view from inside that pre-booking room where I could clearly see that there was space, for example, between I don't believe it was the floor, I believe it was the wall, the brick wall and the person's head. So given her angle, I don't know what she may have seen, if that makes any sense, because of where the officer's body was positioned, where the bench and those desks were, the angles were difficult. So I remember watching the officer's body worn camera and thinking differently than when I saw the bird's eye view, if that's
When you
helpful.
look at dumping him on his head, that means, to me, that means to taking him upside down.
Got it.
dumping him
Yeah.
On the floor.
I hear that. And I wouldn't agree with that characterization, but I would agree that when I watched the officer's body worn video, my question was, did his head make contact at speed with a brick wall? And it wasn't clear to me if that did or didn't happen from some angles. From other angles, I could clearly see that didn't
There was
occur.
never a complaint of injury to the head, though, was there?
He complained of pain later, but not injury to the head, correct? Correct.
I think I think the several witnesses in there, I think they'll have a different perspective.
Right.
And so I think it was, like, to everybody's point, right, like, it's unclear the witnesses' experiences inside.
Thank you, Rick. Lindsay. All right, we're gonna move on to, the floor is, Auditor Renetsky's for a commendation highlight.
So do we have a PowerPoint for that slide? No, okay, so let me just talk about it. So I'm gonna abbreviate so that we can, since we're running out of time. So I'm gonna combine my two presentations a little bit. So one of the things is that during February, we received 27 complaints, 15 reportable 15 reportable uses of force, and 19 accommodations. So I wanted to highlight one of those accommodations, and this one I found to be rather interesting. Just to refresh everybody's recollection, I did a ride along the month before and saw somebody's lives get saved. This one I was not there. But yet again, EPD beat the fire department to the location. Just so everyone has a bit of a perspective, EPD has in their patrol cars, AEDs, automatic defibrillators. So in this sort of a case, having them respond is great. The last time that AED saved a life, this one, it wasn't necessarily an AED, but again, they got to the scene and there was a 10-month-old infant that was in cardiac arrest. And once again, EPD saved a life. So again, that's a real highlight. It's also, in case anyone's ever thinking about getting into law enforcement, this isn't something that veterans are necessarily responding to. And I'm going to ask for Deputy Chief to help a little bit with some of the terms, but we had a trainee call taker that got the initial call, which was probably something along the lines of 10-month-old in cardiac arrest. So this is, I don't know how long their training is, but it's probably pretty darn new, I'm assuming.
I mean, the
Okay.
probationary period is 18 months, so it's under.
Oh.
It's pretty long.
Imagine taking the job and within the first 18 months, this is just the call you get. The officer that arrived was a phase 0 recruit. You want to explain what that is?
Well, phase 0 is a recruit that has not yet been to the academy, is riding along with officers in a capacity that's not necessarily for enforcement purposes, but to give them experience and exposure to the job and stuff before they.
I got to ride along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome to the
It's
police.
like along with you.
So yeah, welcome to the police department. This is what's in your future. So again, just an amazing job by these officers, and it's again, we get to always see a lot of the negative, and I think it's always nice to highlight some of the positives. So for these particular officers, for this event, this was probably something they won't forget anytime soon.
Yeah.
So, again, I normally go into more details, but because of the time, I'm gonna morph into what we're up to in the auditor's office. So we are continuing, this is about my 6-month mark, just past it. And the first 6 months have really been heavily pushed towards community outreach, meeting with different groups, different organizations. One of the things that recently I did was reach out to the Portland Auditor's Office for a perspective. Eugene is blessed in that we have an oversight system, much like we do. If you go around the state of Oregon, there's 2 oversight groups, Portland and us. So this is not the norm. And we're not, in neither one of these organizations of oversight is new. Portland is doing a bunch of changes and their regular head just left. So 20 years we've been doing it. This is our big anniversary. We are working on some recognition programs throughout the year for that purpose. I think it's important that the community get some of that highlight of what we do and this sort of oversight. So we're really working heavily on that. We've also been in touch with 4J to get involved. Beatrice, who's here, should get some of the props for all the work that she's been doing in this community outreach. Anyone that can give her a tip or lead on an organization for me to come out and address, that would be wonderful. Other than that, I want to highlight Beatrice is doing the Citizens Academy. Josh is doing the Citizens Academy and I am as well. So it's really giving us an opportunity for to see a little bit about what the police department does, but also to again interact with the community. Any questions about what we've been up to? I think you all have a pretty good feel, but
Quick question. Did you mention 4J already?
yeah.
Oh, okay, because my daughter works there in DEI, so that's something
Yeah, so
Do we
if I may
mention-
add a little bit more. I am in talks with 4J Welcome Center. So last year we chose to forego our public safety forum, community resource fair, just because we weren't sure if people would feel comfortable coming and attending to talk about public safety topics. And so we debated back and forth about going virtual or trying it in person, and we just chose to just play it by ear and not do anything last year. But this year, we're being very careful about how we approach it. And so we're joining 4J in their Dia del Niño celebration, which is the Children's Day celebration. And so it's like a fun carnival type atmosphere where, I mean, it's fun for the kiddos. It's basically a carnival, like a fair. And they'll have like free food and face painting and all that. And this year they're adding the resource fair side of it to that event so that we can continue to build community and share highlight city departments and share other community partners for trust building and community building. So I am working with 4J staff. It'll take place Saturday, May 2nd from 1 to 3:30 at North Eugene High School. So anybody is welcome to go and take a look and see what that's all about. And yeah, we're excited to be planning.
I can do this offline if not, but if I can mention something quick, that 4J and Bethel and Springfield and a whole lot of other community organizations are also doing, also at North actually, a Pride Fest, May 29th, which we could talk later about. I kind of know one of the people running it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions for me? Okay.
Public comment.
Thank you. Do we have anybody in, nope, well, okay. I'm gonna read a public comment script in case we have anybody who would like to offer public comments. Civilian Review Board accepts public comment at each meeting. Folks wishing to speak must sign up to do so using the request to speak form prior to the beginning of the meeting. Those who are participating online may use the raise hand function to indicate their desire to speak. When your name is called, please provide your full name at the beginning. And you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and you'll be warned by us when you have 30 seconds remaining. At the end of all public comment, the board may respond to comments. And as a reminder, we cannot accept public comments specific to any cases we're discussing during tonight's meeting due to bargain protocols.
Amanda had her hand up.
She did. Amanda, do you need to say something? Or was that a misfire?
I don't have anything. I apologize.
No problem.
Okay. Closing comments. Round robin fashion means we would start with you.
Sure. I'll keep it brief because we're running short on time, but I'll just say one other thing this case in general brought up for me is just the need for continuing mental health and substance use treatment in our community. I think a lot of the cases we see often have a nexus to that in a way that, you know, I think we should be continuing to put support into. One of the things I've talked about previously is, you know, law enforcement officers are not social workers. And oftentimes we put them in situations where we may ask them to play a role like that. In a way that I think doesn't play to strengths as well as other groups, so.
Thank you. My public comment is related to yours, Elise, in that I was in Cleveland last week, and I've never spent any time in the Midwest, really. It's a really big city, dense. And you know, from an unrepresentative small sample size, walking around downtown, I was just not living in Eugene and on the West Coast. I think we have become kind of desensitized to the crisis of unhoused, like, brothers and sisters living in our community. And I would like to also state on the public record that we got to figure out how to increase resources, and I don't know how that's going to happen, but also not continue to put officers in this position. Yeah.
I think just a couple of quick things. One is I'll disagree with what was just said. And also I bring to the table, like I mentioned before, experience living in other cities. In fact, Eugene's a small city. I've lived in here 18 years, longer than I've been anywhere else except where I grew up. It was New York, which is about 118 times the size of Eugene. Probably more. I don't know. I can't do that. I don't know. 8.5 million versus 170,000. So whatever that meant.
Yeah.
That said, one thing I really appreciate about Eugene and about the police and about this group, I think we saw tonight, which is the robust discussion we could have about very difficult topics. And I think the more we can do that, and the more the public can understand what's going on, and that's kind of why I asked that loaded question about who do we represent or who are we, you know, I think the better overall. So I just want to thank you all for that.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
I guess I will echo the same sentiments that have been stated in regards to asking the police to do a lot more than what they really should be doing. That's requires specialized skill sets that we're not paying them enough for that and training them for that. And we should put more effort and resources into finding ways to alleviate the workload that they have.
Yeah, I just agree that it was cool to see the amount of disagreement that was so kind and collaborative tonight. And speaking of mental health, just want to do little plugs. Remind folks about Lane County's mobile crisis team. It's almost staffed to be 24/7. It has shortcomings, and we're doing our best. And then also there's the forensic intensive treatment team, which is street outreach for folks that have regular involvement with the justice system and housed and have serious mental health. And they actually have a street psychiatrist, which is like really cool and unique, something that Lane County is doing. And then the co-responder and peer navigator programs with EPD, and if we can advocate for increased funding to expand those beyond downtown, I think would be, those are all options. When we talk about more mental health resource, there are some, it's just a matter of building on those and then giving feedback, and also the city's opportunity to identify a new level of street outreach and peer navigation. However that falls, in light of the changing landscape of local crisis, there's efforts, but it means working over tax dollars and other ways to support these efforts so that they can be funded for a safe community for all.
Thank you. I agree with that completely. I think that the legislature and Congress are both worthless as far as getting involved in that type of aspect of our life. They've done nothing. All they do is talk and try to stay reelected. Period. I'm tired of it. I think that someone needs to get in there and start mixing it up. That's the reason why you have executive orders and judicial activism, is that the Congress doesn't do anything. So you have a bunch of activists who are active in the judicial system and executive, or pulling these executive orders out of their hands, trying to save the world. And it's not gonna work because the Congress is how it's supposed to be done. The legislature is supposed to be how it's supposed to be done. For the governor to have prosperity team or whatever she calls them, and ignore the people who are in dire need, people who are helpless, who have mental illness, who have drug addiction, is a crime, really. That's too bad. I wish we could do something more about it in our little group, but we can't. So it has to come from somewhere else. I agree with Brittany. I think that supporting her group and people like her is really important, and to stop spending money building housing. I think that's a false solution. Thank you.
All right, it is 7:46. Great time management, everybody. All right, cheers.
Very cool.